با عرض سلام. در رابطه با توافق هسته‌ای بین ایران و امریکا یه مصاحبه‌ای بودش، یک دو روز پیش انجام شده بودش توی کانال العربیه. اینو من دلم نیومد که براتون نشونش ندم. من زیرش زیرنویس گذاشتم و مصاحبه خیلی جذابیه بین آقای جاناتان کانریکس سخنگوی ارتش اسرائیل بودش، ولی الان نیستش، ولی خب الان اومده توی امریکا توی ارگانیزیشن فاندیشن فور دیفنس فور دموکراسی، یه ارگانیزیشنی که لابی میکنن برای اسرائیل و کمپانی امریکاییه ولی لابی میکنن برای اسرائیل. ایشون هم اسرائیلی هستن ولی اینجا الان استخدام شده، اینجا داره کار میکنه. سخنگوی قبلی ارتش اسرائیل بوده. و همچنین آقای سید حسین موسویان، ایشون هم فکر میکنم توی همین تیم مذاکره‌ای برجام بودن. و آقای اسکات هورتون، ایشون هم توی تگزاس هستن، کامنتیتور سیاسی هستن و کانال یوتیوب چنل هم دارن و تو پادکست و اینا هستن. اینا با هم دیگه یه به صورت مصاحبه‌ای میکنن، مثل پادکست واری مونه تقریبا و خیلی جذابه. اینو نگاهش بکنیم با هم دیگه.
To discuss the US-Iran nuclear talks and the prospects of another conflict in the Middle East, I'm joined by Syed Hussein Moussavian, who's a former senior nuclear negotiator for Iran and currently a Middle East security and nuclear policy specialist at Princeton University. Jonathan Conricus, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and a former international spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces. And rounding out our panel, Scott Horton, an American international affairs expert, author and host of The Scott Horton Show. Gentlemen, thank you and welcome to Counterpoints. President Trump has put a 2-month time limit on the nuclear talks. After that, he says, he's going to swap diplomacy for direct attacks on Iran. The sticking point appears to be whether Iran should be allowed to continue low-level enrichment activities in order to generate civilian power supply. But then that would mirror the 2015 nuclear deal, and Trump is adamant that he can strike a better one. So, Syed, Iran has previously agreed to a deal with the US, which was revoked by President Trump in his first administration. Why do you think he's trying to revive a deal now, at this current juncture of geopolitics?
I believe Iran always has been ready, regardless of who is president in the US. Iran has been ready to comply fully with non-proliferation treaty, which permits the member states to enjoy peaceful nuclear technology and abandon to have nuclear bomb. And Iran always has been ready to negotiate with the US, with Europe, with the world powers to have a deal based on non-proliferation treaty. It was the same during Obama. It was the same during President Biden, and it is the same during President Trump. It doesn't matter. I think more it matters, it depends to the United States, whether they want a deal with Iran based on international law regulations, which is non-proliferation treaty, or they do not want, and they want to impose limits far beyond international rules and regulations.
Jonathan, what do you think? Do you think it's the same under any president, or are we seeing a revival of this deal now in President Trump's second term because he wants to be seen as a deal maker, because Israel is prompting him to? Why do you think it's happening now?
Yeah, what I fear is happening is that the cunning Iranians are going to fool a second American administration. They fooled the Obama administration into a very bad deal in 2015. And according to leaks to the media and interviews, currently what I am concerned with is that the cunning Iranians are fooling a second American administration, and they will, by negotiations, eventually pave their way towards having nuclear weapons. I think what has stayed the same are the sinister intentions of the Islamic Republic, their horrible behavior in the region, their imperialism and state sponsoring of terrorism, and of course, their nefarious intentions to try to achieve nuclear weapons, completely against what we hear them say officially. But I think it has been proven so many times that the Iranians They speak, but they lie, and they are very good at deceiving. But at the end of the day, that hasn't changed. And I think that that is my main source of concern now, that they look set to sweet talk and outsmart a second American administration.
Syed, I'm going to get you to respond to what Jonathan has said, but first of all, I want to bring Scott in so that all of our panellists have an equal say in this first round. What do you think, Scott? Is Iran fooling the US a second time round, as Jonathan says?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't take the word of any politician, especially a theocrat, about anything. But the point here is whether we can have an agreement that can be verified. And the fact of the matter is the Iranians mastered the uranium enrichment fuel cycle 20 years ago. And for the most part, they've only enriched up to 3.6%. And they've gone up to higher percentages of purity of 235 in more recent years as part of their diplomacy, playing hardball and trying to get America to go back to the agreement. But essentially, ever since W. Bush declared Iran part of the axis of evil in 2002, their policy has been to open up their books and say, listen, we're not making nuclear weapons, and you can double extra verify that all day long, so you have no pretext for war here. Now, there's a catch, which is that it's really a latent nuclear weapons deterrent is what they have. It's the same as Brazil and Japan, where everybody knows they could make nuclear weapons, but right now they're not. And so it's sort of a standoff where if America doesn't attack them, they won't make nukes. And they won't make nukes if America doesn't attack them. And so if everything, in other words, if we had just stayed within the deal that Trump himself tore up in 2018, we would be right where we had been in 2018, which was a deal where they exported their stockpile of enriched uranium to France, and France would then give them the fuel rods for their electricity program. So they didn't even have a stockpile built up of enriched uranium in the country to even be able to make a nuclear weapon with. And this was the main purpose of the deal, was to lengthen the so-called breakout time so that if the Ayatollah did decide to make a nuke, it would take him more than a year to be able to get one together. And America, of course, would have time to launch a war against them before that. But I think it's not a matter of trusting anything that the Iranian regime says. It's a matter of trusting the IAEA inspectors who can verify the non-diversion of nuclear material to any military purpose.
Okay, Syed, let me throw it back to you to respond to what Jonathan was saying. Is Iran trying to fool the US administration and is trying to make a nuclear weapon? And also respond to what Scott was talking about. Do we need the IAEA to make sure that Iran is sticking to the deal?
What Jonathan says, Iran is trying to fool the US. I think it is easy to find out and to understand whether Israel is trying to fool the US or Iran. It was Israel who fooled the US in 2002. You remember Prime Minister Netanyahu came to US Congress and publicly, officially told every US Congress members that Israel has weapons of mass destruction and the US should attack Israel, and Israel should attack Iraq because Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. And Israel pushed the US. The US attacked Iraq under the umbrella of WMD, weapons of mass destruction, destroyed Iraq, and thousands of Americans, they were either killed or injured, trillions of dollars of damages. Ultimately, it became clear there was no weapons of mass destruction, and Israelis, they lied. And the second fact is that if you go to check Israeli official statements from 1990, you will find every year one Israeli official, at least one, has said Iran is going to have nuclear bomb in 1 or 2 years. For 30, 40 years, this is exactly what Israelis are saying, what Jonathan said. Iran is going to have nuclear bomb in 1 or 2 years. It is not something new. You can find in every newspaper, media. It is easily to find. It has been 40 years of lies to international community that Iran is going to have nuclear bomb in 1 or 2. About what also Israeli policy is very clear. Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday said the only nuclear deal would be accepted for Israel is based on Libya model. What was Libya model? Libya model was to dismantle Libyan nuclear industry. The moment Libyan nuclear industry was dismantled, then Libya was attacked and Libya was destroyed. I mean, this is exactly what they did about Iraq. I mean, this is Israeli policy. It is clear, and they are following the same policy for Iran. They publicly say, they officially say, attack Iran to dismantle Iranian nuclear program. Exactly, they are open to say to international community like Libya. It means dismantle and then attack Iran.
Jonathan, you've been gesturing, Jonathan. I know you want to respond. Jump in. Please feel free, guests, to, if you hear something that you don't agree with, feel free to interject. Jonathan, what do you have to say?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to respond here. You know, it is, I'd like to first and foremost speak about verification and inspection. International agency was mentioned, and I think we should be on the record and be correct, sir. The Atomic Agency itself has indicated that it has absolutely no visibility over what Iran is doing, how much it is enriching, and how far the Iranians have gone in terms of weaponization. This is a clear.
But that's a consequence of America leaving the deal.
No, please, sir. No, please, sir. Don't interrupt, because I didn't interrupt you, even though I think that you said incorrect things, and I think it'll be best if we don't interrupt each other. I waited for my turn. I think the Atomic Agency has been prevented, and there has been sabotage by the Iranians to prevent the Atomic Agency from monitoring their centrifuges, and there have been cameras that have been cut and removed by the Iranian regime, and this has been going on for months. And today, the Atomic Agency acknowledges that there is zero visibility, and in fact, the Atomic Agency does not know the level of advancement of the advanced centrifuges and how much weapons grade material the Iranians have enriched. That's number one. Number two, when it comes, you know, if a person from outer space was listening to this conversation, it might be confused and think that Israel is the source of instability here. And let's keep one thing clear. Iran is an imperialistic, theocratic, terror-supporting regime that spreads violence and chaos in the Middle East. Israel is in its homeland, defending itself against terror organizations and proxies that are funded by the theocratic, evil, imperialistic Iranian regime that is using money, petrodollars, against the US sanctions, by the way, but that is using money to promote terrorism instead of investing in Iran. And we're
going to be focusing on Israel and international countries' sideline talks with both Iran and the US coming up in our next segment. But I want to go to you, Scott. You had something to say. Give us your statement, and then obviously, Sayed, we're going to come to you for reaction. Scott, go ahead.
Well, the gentleman from FDD is right that the Iranians have scaled back their cooperation with international inspectors. But if you look carefully at the agreement of 2018, they actually stipulated in the agreement that if America breaks the agreement and withdraws from the JCPOA, that Iran then has the right under the agreement to reduce their cooperation with the inspectors. That's actually in the deal. So Iran is still in the deal with all the rest of the members of the UN Security Council. The JCPOA is not completely dead, but just America has broken the deal. And it's actually part of the deal that says that they can respond if America breaks the deal, that they can then respond by curtailing their inspections. What we're talking about here is whether Trump and his government can get a new deal with the Ayatollah, in which case, obviously, just like in the case of the previous deal, they have to have openness and inspections, or else the old sanctions regime snaps back into place, as was the old deal under the JCPOA and was agreed by China and Russia and the the rest of America's allies on the UN Security Council as well. And so he's talking about in the dark days of America and Iran not getting along at all, and America under Donald Trump back in 2018 breaking the deal, and the consequences of that things aren't perfect. But that's the whole point of getting back in the deal. And the reality is the Ayatollah has shown, and look, the Director of National Intelligence just put out the new threat assessment in February, where American intelligence, as they have ever since 2007, have reaffirmed that Iran has not made the political decision to begin to try to make nuclear weapons. They are holding on to their latent deterrent, and that has been good enough for them so far. And we should seek to sign a new deal with them, similar to the JCPOA, that permanently ensconces that position, rather than what's the alternative? The alternative is no inspections and more threats and eventually war in the name of preempting a nuclear weapons program that right now does not exist.
So that's going to be my question to Syed before we move on to talk specifically about Israel, Russia, China and their involvement in this deal. I want to ask you, Syed, President Trump has given this a 2-month timeline. How close do you think the region is to a war if a deal can't be struck? Is the US serious? Are they really going to strike Iranian nuclear facilities?
It depends whether President Trump would follow Prime Minister Netanyahu's policy. If he follows, we would be close to war. If he follows the international community, we will have a nuclear deal soon, because there is only one country pushing the US to attack Iran. All other countries, China, Russia, Europe, even President Trump, Canada, all countries, they want peaceful nuclear agreement with Iran based on international rules and regulations, which would guarantee Iran with no nuclear bomb. This is international community. Internationally, all countries, they are united except one country, which is Israel, which is saying to attack Iran, attack Iran, attack Iran for many, many years. This is not something new. But the fact is that Iran is a member of NPT and Israel is not. Iran does not have nuclear bomb. And the only country in the Middle East with hundreds of nuclear bombs is Israel, not Iran. Iran is the most inspected country by the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, compared to any other country member of IAEA. Israel has not given one permission to inspect its nuclear facilities. And more important, JCPOA was the most comprehensive agreement during the history of non-proliferation. This is a consensus by all nuclear scientists internationally. And Iran accepted the highest level of transparency measures, intrusive inspections, and even the most limits on its nuclear program, which no other member of NPT has ever accepted. And Iran fully complied for 3 years. It was the US withdrew, and it was Prime Minister Netanyahu who publicly said, I convinced President Trump to withdraw from the nuclear deal. Therefore, we should see where is the source of the problem.
Jonathan, I know you want to respond. That smile on your face tells me you've got a counterpoint.
Yeah, I think we need to keep in mind who we're talking about here, because the sweet-talking professor may confuse people into thinking that the Islamic Republic of Iran is a peace-loving, benign nation with no nefarious activities in the region. Far from it. There is a countdown clock in Palestine Square in eastern Tehran that is counting down from the year 2040. I've seen pictures of it, and maybe the professor has driven around that square as well. It is counting down from the year 2040 because that is when the Iranian regime intends to annihilate Israel, wipe Israel off the map. And as an Israeli who intends to continue to live in his ancestral homeland, I have no intention, and I don't think that any Israeli should have any willingness to see that vision, that Iranian dream turn into reality. Now, for the Iranian regime, the theocratic, oppressive, barbarian Iranian regime to achieve nuclear military capabilities, that would of course be an aspiration of the Iranian regime. And it is no surprise that Israel is the country that puts it front and center of its national security to prevent Iran from achieving such a thing, because we know that we would be the target. And that is why Israel is not waiting for the Iranians to sweet talk their way into negotiations and out of negotiations. And that is why Israel wants to take strong, real measures against Iran. Regarding inspections, I wish that inspectors had been able to reach a certain warehouse in the outskirts of Tehran and uncover the illicit Iranian weapons program. Reportedly, Israeli Mossad agents did it, and they got there, and they discovered that the Iranians lied, continued to lie, and are still lying about the real intentions of the nuclear program. It is not benign, it is not peaceful, it is not in accordance with international law and stipulations, as the professor would have you believe. It is a weapons program that, if it is completed, would be in the hands of a theocratic, crazy, oppressive, and terror-supporting regime. And as long as Israel exists, whoever is the prime minister, I think that isn't something that Israel or Israelis or any other peace-loving country should allow to happen.
So we should remind our viewers that Iran denies that it is proliferating nuclear weapons. So far, the IAEA says that although they are enriching uranium to a much higher level that they did before the nuclear deal was torn up, they aren't at that stage yet. But let's move on to some international interventions here. Iran has accused Israel of seeking to undermine and disrupt the diplomatic process to open the way for military action. Israel's Prime Minister has openly spoken about wanting to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities and wants the US's help in that, something that the US obviously, if we listened to President Trump, seems very willing to do. So, Scott, as an outside perspective, I suppose, because we're obviously going to go to Jonathan and Syed with their very distinct views, but with more of a broader perspective, what's your take on it? Do you get the sense that Israel is trying to drag the US into a war with Iran? Is that a very real possibility?
Yes, it's been a very real possibility for a long time. And, I appreciate that the Foundation for Defense of Democracies is just going ahead and hiring outright Israeli nationals to represent them. I hope it's clear to the American people here that none of this has anything to do with America first. This is all Israel instead. This is Israel, a foreign nation that is of no use to the United States whatsoever. We get nothing of benefit out of our relationship with them whatsoever. This is their security concerns. And we're supposed to go to another massive Middle East war, another disastrous Middle East war, to protect a foreign country that we don't even have a treaty of alliance with in any way. And Jonathan says that Iran is a giant imperialist power in the Middle East. Well, the worst thing they've done in the 21st century was take Baghdad after George W. Bush handed it to them based on the lies of Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's neoconservative fifth column in the United States that said that if we overthrew Saddam Hussein, that would get America dominance over the Iraqi Shia, and then they would dominate the Iranians. A free Iraq would be a nightmare for Iran, is what David Wormser said. So this was all about breaking Iran's ability to back Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And then what happened instead? Instead, Iran's best friends now rule Baghdad. The guys from the Supreme Islamic Council and the Dawa Party, who had lived in Iran for 20 years before W. Bush came and invaded and ensconced them in power in that horrific 8-year war that America fought in the early part of this century. So The second worst thing they did, the thing that benefited Iranian power more than any other thing other than the Iraq war, was Obama's dirty war in Syria, which just forced the Syrian regime to be more dependent on Hezbollah and Iran, and for 15 years became even more dependent on Iran until al-Qaeda finally overthrew the government in Damascus and sacked Damascus last December. So supporting Israel's interests in trying to stick it to the Iranians has done nothing but backfire and one, strengthen Iran at Israel's expense, but also just waste nothing but American lives and money this whole time for nothing. And listen, there's a real reason why the Pentagon told W. Bush back in 2007 that they don't want to attack Iran. It's because Iran is 4 times bigger than Iraq. It's got 3 times the population, massive mountain ranges and so forth. And unlike Iraq, had not been bombed and blockaded for a decade leading up to the war. And so they have the ability to defend themselves in a way that would be extraordinarily costly for the United States if we start this war. We have troops in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Qatar, and in Saudi Arabia, all within Iranian missile range. And they're all supposed to die for Israel? No, America first.
Syed, I'm going to come to you, but before I do, I just want to give right of reply to Jonathan. Is it less America first, Israel instead?
There are so many inaccuracies, fallacies, and lies in what the gentleman said. I struggle to start, but I'll just say this. Israel has never asked for anybody to do its fighting for it. On the contrary, what we ask for and what we need is weapons, but we never ask anybody to fight for us. We never asked anybody to take out the Iraqi nuclear reactor in 1982. By the way, it was condemned at the time, and afterwards many countries thanked us. We never asked anybody to take action against the Syrian nuclear reactor in 2007, and we did so by ourselves. We have never asked anybody to defend us in the almost countless wars that have been waged against Israel by our Arab neighbors. And we haven't asked US troops to defend us against Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, or the Iranian Revolutionary Guard that have been attacking Israel since October 7 and, of course, before that. So to say that Israel is dragging anybody is, I would say, intellectually dishonest. Israel is defending itself, and I think Israel is doing a tremendous job of being a staunch and loyal American ally in the Middle East, being a steadfast ally that doesn't waver and stays committed to the US and continues to support US interest in the region. There are many countries that have second thoughts, that are perhaps flirting with the Chinese or flirting with the Russians. Israel does not do that. And Israel, I think, if anything, only does good to the foreign interest and the national security of the state of the United States. Now, last point that I think is very important to keep in mind here, for the gentleman sitting in the US or wherever it is, and for people watching it from other places, this could be an academic exercise. For Israelis, it is not. We are living in an existential threat that is generated by the Islamic Republic of Iran. We are fighting Iranian proxies. We're fighting, dismantling, and we will soon be defeating Iranian proxies every day. Everywhere we look, whether it's south, north, and northeast, we see Iranian flags, we see the Revolutionary Guard, we see Hezbollah, we see Islamic Jihad, and we see Hamas, and we see Iranian advisors trying to kill Israelis or to use Arabs in order to do so. So to claim that we are the aggressors is very much far from the truth. And I think that it should be clear here that the Iranians are trying to buy time in order to shield themselves from an Israeli retaliation against their aggression. After the Iranians attacked Israel twice, Israel responded. And I think the Iranians know very well that now is not a good time for the Iranians to be tough. Now is a good time for the Iranians to use their diplomatic skills, and hands down, I think they are the best negotiators in the world. I give them credit sincerely for being that, and perhaps the professor should be given respect for that as well. But at the end of the day, I think we're coming to a close, and I will complete. I think we're coming to really money time here. The Iranians are trying to buy time, and that window of opportunity is closing. And just to be clear, Israel isn't asking for anybody to do its dirty work for it. We will continue to defend ourselves by ourselves.
Okay. Syed, I want to bring you in. Okay, Scott, just really briefly. Go ahead.
Yeah, very briefly. The huge New York Times story from a week and a half ago was about how Israel was shocked and dismayed that Donald Trump had told them, no, we're not going to bomb Iran for you. We're going to seek negotiations instead. He says that Israel isn't trying to get America to attack Iran for them. Why don't you read the newspaper record, man? It's a giant story right there from a week and a half ago. Adam Entus helped write it.
Wow. So if it was written in the New York Times,
Ronan Bergman, the Israeli journalist, helped write it.
Yes, so what? So if it was written in the New York Times, I have to believe it's truth. You want me to give a list of falsehoods and lies that have later been corrected that were published front and center of the New York Times? I could speak for hours
go
about
against Israel.
the inaccuracies and fallacies of the New York Times. So excuse me if I'm not impressed at whatever is written.
Okay, the rest of the audience can read it for themselves.
Especially, yeah, they can read for themselves and everybody will judge. And I think more and more people read and they decide that it is not credible, especially when it comes to Israel.
Okay, Syed, let me bring you in
Ronan
here.
Bergman helped write it, and he's very close to Israeli intelligence. Everyone knows that.
Syed, let me ask you, what is your take on this? Give me the sense of what's being debated, but also I want to ask you this. On the flip side of all the criticism or discussion perhaps of whether or not Israel is trying to play the US, there has also been criticism from the US and Israel about Iran talking with Russia and China before each new round of negotiation, that it's not negotiating in good faith and it's making the negotiators nervous about perhaps they are also being played by some of the other big superpowers. So react to what some of our guests have said, but also respond to that question for me.
First of all, China and Russia, they are member of United Nations Security Council. They are member of Iran nuclear deal, and Iran is negotiating with the US, with Europe, with Russia, with China, with all members of United Nations Security Council based on the nuclear deal JCPOA. Second, in addition to 5 permanent members of United Nations Security Council, Iran is in permanent and very active consultation, dialogue, and cooperation with the regional countries, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Emirates, keeping them posted on the nuclear talks. They are negotiating, discussing the nuclear issue with the neighboring countries. Therefore, it has nothing to do with whether Iran is going to do something separate with Russia and China against the West, because the recent statement by Iranian foreign minister, he invited Europe to have dialogue with Europe also. This is number one. Number two, Iranian nuclear crisis started in 2003. Since then, in every season, the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, has issued a statement or a report on Iran. You would see in every report since 2003 saying that there is no evidence of diversion toward weaponization in the Iranian nuclear program. Every report without exception. If this is IAEA, I mean, if we are committed to international rules, regulations, organization, this is the IAEA statement. This is number one. Number two, almost each 2-3 years, the United States security organizations, they have publicly, officially said there is no evidence of diversion toward weaponization in Iranian nuclear program. It is only Israel who is repeating this claim since 1990, non-stop. This is number one. Number two, whether Iran is really the source of instability in the region. I mean, we have seen during last 2 years, Israel destroyed Gaza, over 200,000 people either killed, injured, Palestinians, 2 million people displaced. Israel every day is attacking Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. And before, frankly speaking, it was the US who launched war on Iraq and Afghanistan, NATO on Libya. The source of instability in the region, we should accept these wars has been the source of instability. Now, the US has come to conclusion.
That is rich to come from
another
an Iranian
war
official.
in the
That
Middle East
really
is
rich.
not in the
I have
national
to
interest
interrupt
of
here
United
because to
States.
hear this
Americans, they
from
do
an
not
Iranian
want to
official,
go to another
blame
war
others for
in this
instability,
region.
that is super rich.
I'm talking, Jonathan, I'm talking. You were supposed not to talk, and I'm
It's
talking.
just preposterous. That
Americans,
Iranian
they
is
have
sitting wherever
reached
you're
to the
sitting
conclusion
and blaming
war
others
is
for
not
violence
in
in
the
the Middle
interest
East when
of
Jonathan, just let
the
Syed
United
finish,
States.
and then we'll come to you for reaction
Countries
next.
in the region, they do not want war. Nobody wants war. Ultimately, whether we want to have a peaceful deal or war, if we are going to have peaceful deal, the criteria should be non-proliferation treaty. The criteria should be International Atomic Energy Agency, and Iran has proved during JCPOA that they are ready to give the highest level of transparency measures to IAEA to have open nuclear program. They proved in 3 years, and now they are ready. That's why I think everybody should push. And at the end, I should also mention, I have always opposed calls either by Iranians to destroy Israel or Israelis to destroy Iran. I have always been supportive of two-state solution, and calling for destroy Iranians, Israelis, or Israelis, Iranians is against United Nations Security Charter. And it is Israel who has opposed two-state solution. If Israelis, they would have accepted two-state solution, we could have Israel-Palestine 8 years ago. The source of the mother of crisis in the Middle East is the Palestinian-Israeli crisis, and it is because Israel has denied every United Nations Security Council since 8 years ago, hundreds of United Nations Security Council resolutions on two-state resolution, and now again Israel is saying no Palestinian state. This is the source of the problem. Destroying Gaza, 2 million people, really has nothing to do with Iran.
Jonathan, is that the source of the problem? Could this have all been avoided?
Yeah, of course, it could have been avoided if those pesky Jews would have agreed to die or to be killed by jihadis.
It's not what Syed is saying, though, is it?
Well, I will get to it. It is extremely rich to hear from a former Iranian official now enjoying pasture at an American university, to be hearing lectures about what the source of instability in the region is, and to blame Israel for it. Israel, unfortunately, is facing attacks by various terror organizations, almost all of them funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran. To make one thing very clear, even the most extreme Israeli politicians, I do not remember a single one saying, we want to destroy Iran. On the contrary, I can give you a long list of elected and appointed officials in Iran, members of parliament, members of the Revolutionary Guard, commanders of the army, and of course the head of state, the supreme leader himself, who not only speak about that they want to destroy the state of Israel, but actively engage in it and call on others to do so. And I think that if we are, tethered by reality and truth here, at least you should acknowledge that it is Iran that is the aggressor. It is Iran that is supplying weapons and money and political guidance to terror organizations in the Middle East, wreaking havoc in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen, in Iraq, and partially in Afghanistan as well.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so let me turn it over to Scott for a final comment. Scott, what do you think about what Jonathan's just said? Is Iran the aggressor?
Well, I mean, first of all, Israel's not a state in the Union. So I don't care about Israel or Israel's national security concerns whatsoever. I'm from Texas. I'm from the United States of America, and I'm an American patriot. And Israel has their own problems. America could have normalized relations with Iran back in 1993, which, by the way, after the revolution, Israel kept getting along with Iran. Remember when Ronald Reagan sold the missiles? It was through Israel during Iran-Contra. And right when America was finally ready to start getting along with Iran in 1993 was when Yitzhak Rabin, the Israeli prime minister, turned their policy around and started demonizing them instead. America, in fact, even Ronald Reagan's Secretary of State, Alexander Haig, wanted to work on a deal to build an oil pipeline across Iran in the early 90s to begin to warm up American relations. That was 35 years ago. We could have normalized relations with Iran. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who had egg all over his face from the Iranian Revolution, took place on his watch, the hostage crisis and the rest, when he worked for Jimmy Carter. By the early 90s, he said it's time to get along with the Iranians, build an oil pipeline across Iran, and open up relations. And it was the Israel lobby who absolutely insisted that this could not happen and insisted instead on this ridiculous dual containment policy, which meant Bill Clinton had to keep the bases in Saudi Arabia for his entire presidency, which was the leading cause of the September 11th attack against the United States in turning America's al-Qaeda mercenaries against our own country.
Jonathan, have a quick response to that before we give it to Syed for a final comment.
Yeah, I wish you the best, and I wish that you never have to face what we are facing here. It's okay to sit in remote Texas and talk tough about fighting in the Middle East. I can assure you that that is what we're doing. What you say is full of inaccuracies.
Talking tough about it.
Yeah, I know you sound like you're talking tough, but I'm not very impressed by it, and not by your liveful rhetoric against my country.
I'm talking peace here, man. You're the one who's talking tough.
We aren't telling anybody what to do. Last time I remember, it was Shiite Hezbollah that killed, I think it was almost 300 U.S. Marines in Beirut. But maybe the lives of those Marines are important for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe they weren't important
Ronald Reagan
for you.
Sold
maybe
the missiles 3 years after that.
Maybe they were not important for you. Maybe you've forgotten. But I'm happy to refresh your memory.
Israel knew about that attack before it happened. It didn't warn America.
Extremist Islam.
Israel knew about the Beirut attack, and they kept it secret.
It comes in various shapes and sizes. Sometimes it's Shiite, sometimes it's Sunni. But at the end of the day, when they chant death to America and that America is Satan, you can hear that's being said by Shiites and by Sunnis. They do it with different dialects and they do it with different chants. But at the end of the day, I can assure you, Israel is not looking for anybody to fight its war. What Israel wants to do is to live here peacefully in our ancestral homeland. The sooner our neighbors understand, the sooner, no, it isn't. It is Israel is the nation state and the homeland of the Jewish people.
I'm going to hand it over to Syed to wrap it up for us. From what we've heard, from what this debate has brought to the surface, Syed, do you have any confidence that a deal can be struck, that Israel will allow US to do a deal, that the US is interested in doing a deal if it goes against what Israel may want? How confident or otherwise are you?
I really don't know, because there is clear Israel has huge influence in Washington, no doubt about it, on the Congress, on the White House, and we all heard in Trump 1 era that Prime Minister Netanyahu publicly said he convinced President Trump to withdraw from JCPOA, to impose a maximum pressure policy. He publicly said, I convinced President Trump to designate IRGC as terrorist organization. Whether he would have the same policy, the same influence, whether President Trump would follow the same Israeli policy, I'm very optimistic we will have a deal. But if it's going to be a deal based on verification, based on no nuclear weapon, based on international rules, regulations, I believe the US will be able to have a peaceful nuclear deal with Iran, with every objective guarantees that Iran will remain non-nuclear weapon state like last 40, 50 years. And I hope if there is a peaceful nuclear deal between Iran and the US, the US will play a role to stop this Israeli-Iranian military security confrontation, because always I have been saying this is neither in the interest of Israel, nor Iran, nor the US, nor the region if Israel and Iran are going to continue fighting each other.
Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there, but we appreciate all your analysis here on Counterpoints. Former senior Iranian nuclear negotiator Syed Hussein Moussavian, Jonathan Conricus, senior fellow at the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, and American international affairs expert, author, and radio host Scott Horton. Thank you for your time here on Counterpoints.